Hi, friends, and welcome to another episode of the I Owe It to Myself podcast as we dive into the read-along series for A Court of Mist and Fury. In this episode, I'm going to be talking about chapters 1 through 15, and let me just say that my tune has changed a little bit in regard to how I'm reacting to this text versus book 1. ACOTAR is one of my favorite series. I've mentioned this before, but I love SJM's writing. I love the characters. And I was very excited to start this reread of all of these books. But I had mentioned in some of my episodes for book 1 that I just really felt kind of bland and or nothing going back in, which I was actually glad about because despite knowing where the characters were going to go, as much as I do love them, I wasn't feeling that bias when I was reading the text, and I felt like I was really open to be able to take it in for what it is. And I certainly still feel that way now, but I am just so excited about where this is going. And I guess I will have to just say that I'm sure that it is because Rhysand is a favorite character for me, but I think it's also because I just know that this book is transformational for Feyre, and that's kind of the part where I want to start. Where we found Feyre at the end of book 1 was that she was just utterly and completely shattered from everything that had happened, and rightfully so. The summation, if I had to give one, is that her entire life changed because her world was opened up to all of this newness in Fae territory, including the fact of realizing that a lot of the lore that she believed wasn't necessarily true. She learned new things, like her mind was already open in regard to that in general. Additionally, there was this huge threat in the way in which Amarantha reigned and the tie back to Hybern. And on top of that, not only was she crucial to breaking the curse of that reign, but when she went under the mountain, she endured horrors and just saw the degree to which Amarantha reigned in the worst possible way. And even still in knowing that there are people out there and threats out there that are worse than that. And that would be a lot for anybody to process at any given time. Then on top of that, it's all of what she had to do and how she is or isn't dealing with it that is affecting her. So when we get into this book, we really don't skip a beat and we pick right back up with that. One of the things that I want to comment on and start, which is related to Feyre, but it's in regard to Ianthe. I admittedly forgot a little bit about her, and I will say that it was very easy for me to be in Feyre's camp of finding comfort in her because, and this is one of those examples as to why the writing is so good to me, because I am so easily able to be in this place where I understand and feel Feyre's frustration and struggles. Like, obviously I'm not feeling all of what she's feeling in regard to the horrors she faced under the mountain, but I can very much put myself into her shoes to a degree of understanding how much she just doesn't want to do certain things or is struggling to be where she is. And so Ianthe being there, although it is for work and it's part of her duty to the court and just this allyship that she has with the Supreme Court in general, she is providing a comfort for her that at the time seriously feels like it is just Feyre's only grasp to life. Like, she is her only lifeline because she is somebody who just provides a little bit enough of a reprieve away from the constant no's and rejection that she's frankly getting from Tamlin and from Lucien. With that, though, what is important to call out and note is that at the end of the day, Ianthe's motives are going to be to the benefit of the Supreme Court and herself. We cannot forget that there are games that Fae can play and will always play, but there's a lot of this political game as well. And so throughout the time where we see Feyre talking about leaning on Ianthe and the way in which that she's supporting her through certain events and getting prepped for the wedding, there's also commentary from Feyre's point of view about her own status, her own power, the way that she leads her life, and commenting on the fact that she knows that, like, she wants to be in good standing or get credit for certain things or whatever. So Feyre is certainly clocking some of those things, whether she is really realizing it or not, because we're seeing it on the page. But it is something to keep an eye out. So while I say that I can appreciate Ianthe in this moment and in the chapters up until this point, that is something that is in the back of my mind, as is Rhys's commentary in regard to her, because he doesn't want to have anything to do with her. And a lot of what I think Feyre still thinks is happening is what had happened between Rhys and Tamlin's family. If Ianthe is an ally to Tamlin and his family in the court and was another person that he grew up with, then the way that Tamlin hates Rhys is going to be her stance as well. So that makes sense. But as we've started to see, Rhys has this way of commenting on things or mentioning things that we certainly will circle back to, and him not being a fan of her is most definitely important to pay attention to. And I know that because I also know that it comes up later in this book. So certainly we are not done with her by any stretch of the imagination. But the other piece of that, and what reinforces for me that she's someone to keep an eye out for, is because when there are conversations where Lucien is trying to advocate for Feyre to get training and to kind of use and hone her powers and her skills, Ianthe is in the camp of we can't do that. What's interesting about that is, as much as we know about the closeness of Tamlin and Ianthe from a work relationship and an ally relationship and perspective, Feyre has a moment where she's like, the fact that Ianthe knows that I have power, the fact that she's in that room and having that discussion, it very much reinforces that frustration that Feyre has about why don't I know anything? Why are you not talking to me, but you'll talk to her? Because at this point in time, Ianthe is the only other female that is holding any weight that Feyre has ever encountered in the Spring Court in this way. And so of all things, you would think that somebody who wants to be her husband would include her, but he's not, but yet he's including Ianthe. And some of that, of course, is just her own insecurity and Feyre's own frustrations coming through. But it is a valid point because it's what is the deal with that, right? It's not just a female thing. You haven't been not including me just because I'm a female, clearly because you're including Ianthe. But it was one of those moments that was very, very fast in the book that she mentioned it. But it does stand out because it puts Ianthe in a place where we knew she was powerful being a high priestess. And that is mentioned, even though she's coming and she's doing these events and whatever, she is all about the public perception and the positioning of herself and other people to each other. She is very much a manipulator in that way in the political realm. That's the way that she's kind of positioned. So to know that she has this edge and this inside with Tamlin, again, is another reason where it's yeah, she might be powerful in her own right, but there is sway that she has here, and that's something that we cannot ignore. Now, the other thing with all of this is we see Lucien being more sympathetic towards Feyre than Tamlin is. And that kind of goes back to what I mentioned in book 1, where there was something about how Feyre and Lucien connected early on that I knew was going to continue to carry through. And it's not just because I've read the books, but I think in the way that he was positioned in those books and the way that she would speak about Lucien and comment on that fact, those aren't mistakes. And those are things to remember and to pay attention to. And so in this, we see Lucien very much leaning towards her in certain things. But here's the key about this. He is not fully her ally because he serves Tamlin, and he will, as of this moment, always be loyal to Tamlin. And so you see Feyre mentioning things where she has interactions with Lucien, and he, inquires about her powers and sees her frustration and sees her struggling and says, I'll talk to him. And he does in fact go do that, but he can never win and he can never get through. And Feyre is screaming on the inside to be just keep pushing, just stand your ground, do anything to just get him to see. And Lucien won't. At the end of the day, he may try 1 or 2 or 3 times, but after that 3rd time, he's just not going to do it. And even at the table, when they're having certain discussions, he will just kind of at some point bow down and step away from it all. And she is so aggravated by that because it's always walking on eggshells with him. It's Tamlin is leading and ruling with an iron fist to some degree, yet at the same time, he can be this nice and loving and gentle partner. But she is just screaming for anyone to be on her side in terms of just stand your ground. And what I find funny about this is at one point when she does get extremely frustrated by the whole situation, she gets up to leave from the dinner table and she says something to Tamlin about grow up. And you see in her inner monologue her thinking I know that I snapped or maybe I went too far or whatever, but she's also very much noting on what I just said, which is I just can't take it anymore. This is so ridiculous. And so you have these people that are around Tamlin that at the end of the day, they are just going to do what he says. And that puts Feyre at an extreme disadvantage. Now, the last thing that I want to say about this before I go on to talk about Tamlin and Rhysand is that in the moment when Feyre loses her shit, when Tamlin locks her in the house and Mor comes to get her, you see a very quick line where Alice is talking to Mor and she's take care of her, please take care of her. And then later, Rhysand comments on the fact of like, you freaked everybody out in that house. Like they didn't know what to do because you were just enveloped in like a wall of darkness. So sure, could Alice's comment or concern be coming from that place? Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure that it is. But there is a moment, or I would at least like to think that in there somewhere, in that moment of her saying that to Mor, that she knew that she was not well, that she's been seeing that she's not well. And that while she would never say or do anything because she just wants her job and to like carry on with her life, understandably so, that she knew in that moment that Mor could do something that Alice never could. And she was like, please take care of her. Like, she's not saying help her, then bring her back. It's just help her. And I think in part it's because despite how much Alice never believed that Feyre could do anything about the situation with the curse in the way that she spoke to Feyre, her actions said otherwise because she did end up bringing her to the mountain, right? And so at the end of the day, and even in this book, when Feyre's been back, she says like, Alice won't even let me do anything. And it's simply just because of everything that I did, which she feels conflicted about, right? But you know that Alice is one of those people that is in that camp of just feeling utterly indebted to Feyre. And again, understandably so. But in this moment, for so many reasons, Alice just knows that there's only so much she can do, and she couldn't do anything in this situation. And so she is just pleading to Mor to make her better and to help her, right? And to care for her. Like I think that there's so much underneath those words of saying, please take care of her, please help her, that we won't know, right? But I think that it is inferred in just the way that Alice has kind of been positioned in this story as a character herself, but in regard to how she's been positioned to Feyre and the kind of comfort and honesty that she shared with her. I think Alice certainly sees more than we expect or necessarily see on the page. As for Tamlin, this is where things start to get really complicated. If I could summarize these first 15 chapters, it really is all just about processing grief and shame and fear and control, and all of that is coming to life in several different ways, being worked through, being ignored. That whole conflict between Feyre and Tamlin of not being able to articulate what they need, what they feel, communicate well with each other, being seen, being heard, all of this kind of stuff is happening time and time and time again over the first 15 chapters. So while Feyre rather quickly goes to the Night Court and is taken for her first week of the bargain with Rhys, which I'll talk about here shortly, this issue drags on for 15 chapters. And that isn't a small portion of this book. It is roughly, I would say, a fourth of the book. And it can feel exhausting and it can feel hard for the reader because you're just like, my gosh, snap out of it. But if I had to say anything in regard to the kind of writer that SJM is, it's intentional for us to feel that, right? We need to feel the torment and the frustration and the anger because that is what Feyre is experiencing and feeling. And it only makes sense that we are feeling that it's coming through so much so in the writing that we are experiencing that because it's extremely important to the way in which Feyre makes decisions going forward and to the kind of character that she is becoming. Now, when it comes to Tamlin and the role that he plays in all of this, he now is becoming the source of that frustration for Feyre. And it's a big roller coaster and a lot of whiplash in regard to the two of them and how they are interacting with one another. Feyre is asking for more freedom, but also more responsibility. She wants to help. She wants to rebuild. She wants to fight the enemy. She wants to do anything that isn't just staying in the house and wearing nice clothes and being quote unquote comfortable. Because here's the thing, there was a moment where when she realized in book 1 that her family was safe and that her burden of caring for them, she didn't have to carry that anymore. And when she wasn't as aware of the issues that they were having as she is now, where she really was like, can I live this blissful of a life? Is this really what my life is going to be forever? And was basking in it and enjoying it, as anybody would who came from being so poor and struggled so much to being in the situation that she was in and to find happiness when she thought that she wouldn't. Now, all of that has changed. She irrevocably changed underneath that mountain, and Tamlin refuses to do anything in regard to it. His only thing is keeping her safe. And the part that is hard about it is while we know his motivation in terms of her mentioning time and time again that he's a protector, he just wants to protect, like he saw her die under the mountain, he never wants to feel that helpless again. The reality is that is shielding him or blinding him to see that she is not thriving when she is in his court. There is like one moment where he came back from being somewhere and Feyre says that he like looked her up and down and continued into the bathroom, but he doesn't say anything about it. He doesn't want himself to see how much she's struggling, because we hear comments of how thin she is and how much she isn't sleeping and all this kind of stuff, but he won't talk about it. He won't address it with her in regard to how she's feeling. And when she asks him or brings up the fact that he's not sleeping or he has nightmares or whatever, he won't say anything. His communication skills are so poor that he is unwilling to have any kind of real conversation with her about what would make her happy. He's not sitting there and saying, look, I know that you want to go out and help. I understand that, but I am not prepared to offer that to you in the way that you want. But I need us to talk about what would make you happy. What within the grounds or area that I can have a little bit of control of would allow you to feel like you can breathe again and to rest easy. And I know you're not sleeping, so what would help you sleep? Like, he's not saying any of that or doing anything about it. And for a minute, you think or almost can understand why, right? Because things just didn't suddenly get better. Like, the courts are in shambles. There's high lords that are leading that haven't really led before because they were under the mountain or were, distressed from all the stuff Amarantha was doing, that now that they're back out, they have to figure out how to even run a court and how to lead their people. Like, everything is chaos. And that's exactly how Hybern wanted it to be, which is why he let Amarantha kind of run free for so long, which all of that picture gets clarified for us in Rhysand telling Feyre the truth about what's been happening. And so it makes sense that Tamlin is absolutely all over the place and struggling. But we see moments where she talks about how, like, we have a day here or a day there or a couple of days together where we can frolic and make love and this and that. And they're not saying anything to each other. And she even says the physical part is the easy part. That's never been where we struggled. But everything else, it's just in shambles. And this is the part where people who are maybe empathetic towards Tamlin or were maybe pro him because he's the first male character that we see in the book in a significant way that Feyre loves and has feelings for and is physical with. People who were pro him, a lot of them in the fandom started to turn at this point, because the degree to which he is controlling, the extent of which he has no boundaries in locking her down to retain control, it's kind of nuts. And so much so that she has a full-blown panic attack and meltdown that Mor has to come and get her out before her time, per the agreement of the deal that they made. So by the time that these 15 chapters wrap, you are in a place with Feyre where she's starting to wake up. Not completely, she's barely hanging on, but she is seeing herself for what she is in terms of how sick she looks and how unhealthy she feels and how tired she is. But at the same time, Rhysand is already starting to give her more freedom and help her and all of this kind of stuff, which I'll talk about more when I talk about Rhys. You can see her processing the fact of, like, I can't live like that in the Spring Court, and I can't be there and have those kinds of shackles on me. I can't do that forever. Even though Lucien says things like, just be patient, please be patient, part of what they all are trying to do at the same time is to get them married at some point. So even though the wedding was on hold and they never really talked about it, her and Tamlin, or even her and Ianthe, or anybody, it seems, you would think that you would want to feel confident in that situation, that relationship, before you get married. And that's kind of the point of where they're at now. But nobody can feel confident in that if they aren't actually communicating. So it's like, okay, well, how patient do you want me to be? Because you have to remember, even though Feyre is Fae now, her concept of forever is still so different than theirs. It's probably going to take her decades until she's supposed to, like, physically be like 50 or 60 years old before it hits her that her body hasn't changed and that it's forever, right? She is so still in that human mindset, and nobody is empathetic to that or understanding that. So when she sits there and months and weeks go by and nobody is conversating, it feels like she's drowning and forever going to be just in this hell of a Spring Court, which she once really loved and is now struggling in. And that's the problem. Not only are her feelings all over the place and is she frustrated and feels alone and is like, this depression is crippling her, but nobody is seeing her still as a human. It's just like she should be fine and it should be okay to just kind of leave her there to do whatever she needs to do and not foster her and help her grow and help her get comfortable and all of this kind of stuff. They're just stunting her and almost shoving her off to the side to be like, we'll address it later. And it is because they have such huge issues at hand. But if Tamlin was smart, he would act like Rhys, where he knew that she was something to behold and had power that could help them, and not be scared of it or not view it as a threat. Because the reality at the end of the day is the threat is going to come whether she's ready or not. And at one point, even Tamlin does comment on that in the conversation with Lucien and Ianthe about her power and training her. He has that moment where he says it's going to happen whether or not we're ready. Actually, that might have been Lucien. But they know that. It has been discussed among them. But yet it's just still like, well, no, it just would complicate things. It's like things are already complicated. They didn't stop being complicated because Amarantha died. They're still complicated and still extremely threatened. And so what difference would it really make? Like, sure, why add more fuel to the fire by training her? But instead of looking at it as fuel to the fire, look at it as a benefit like Rhysand does. But of course they don't. And so there starts to be these stark differences between how Tamlin is behaving and acting and how Rhysand is behaving and acting. And it, of course, is all intentional, but I will say that I really forgot how bad it was. Like, I knew when I would watch social clips and people comment on it and whatever, I, knew that obviously Tamlin was an ass, but when you're in it and you're reading it, my blood was boiling for her. My anger was rising for her. Like, I was so frustrated. And so then when Rhysand would come and things would ease a little bit and she would have the ability to breathe a little bit more, I would be extra excited because I'm like, oh gosh, I forgot what this difference between them really is and the role that they play. But it's not just Rhysand being manipulative and cunning. It is a genuine difference between the way he sees the world and views Feyre and the way that Tamlin does. And that's the important part. So when we look at Tamlin, he is struggling in his own right, but he's not necessarily admitting it. He's not trying to talk through it. He'll sit there and say that he's trying, and she will give him a little bit of grace at times, but nothing really at the end of the day is changing. And his lack of ability to communicate and his anger issues is what is sending him to the grave in terms of this relationship with Feyre. He is doing himself no favors, and he isn't even seeing that it's his own actions that are frankly killing her and making her a shell of herself more than she already was. He's not trying to help her or save her or to heal her from the trauma, all while doing all these other things. He's doing nothing, and that's the thing. He could at least be healing her and trying to help with her trauma and PTSD, even if he can't give her what she's asking for in terms of going out on rides or missions or whatever, but he's doing none of it. And that is the core of the issue. She is just literally festering there, and it is not okay. With that, what I will say is I did forget a little bit of also how intense her feelings are towards Tamlin in the negative sense. When she was getting ready to marry him and walking down the aisle and how she was feeling and how everything was, but then also how she's processing things now. To me, it is all totally valid based on everything that I've said and the way that she's been treated. But I forgot how stark it was. I forgot how much it really went from positive to negative so quickly. And I think that that is in part exemplifying her state of mind and how fragile and confused that she is. But one thing that just hit me as I was saying that is that she specifically told Ianthe, no red flowers. And the thing that triggered her on that walkway was the red roses. And even though her heart of heart was like, no, I can't do this, that was the triggering moment to stop her. And there is this idea that because of Ianthe being who she is and everything I've mentioned, that she was willing to run that risk that Feyre would have that kind of freak out and they wouldn't actually get married because she has bigger plans at play. We will see in time, but that is an indicator. And I should have mentioned this in my first thought process with Ianthe, but I just remembered it now. And I think it's important to point out that that is exactly the kind of indicator that puts it in the negative column for Ianthe and in the mysterious in a not good way column. Because why would you do that? If you're here for the betterment of the Spring Court and for Prythian, you would want Tamlin to have his wife. You would want them to be happy. You would want them to be copacetic and peaceful and healing together. And she sees as much as Lucien or anybody else probably, maybe a little less, I guess. But she has to know that Feyre is not doing well. And so to do that means that she was willing to risk it all, that wedding wouldn't happen, despite all of the other efforts that she was putting out to make it happen. That's the kind of shit a sneaky fae would do. And that's something that we need to remember. Now I'll go ahead and wrap up my thoughts about these 15 chapters by talking about Rhysand and Feyre's experience with him and the places that he takes her. There are moments when he is traveling with her or brings her to the night court for the first time, or just in interactions where she either says outright some of her fears of like, please don't take me there, I don't want to do this, or starts to think it, or like starts to say it before he will just respond to her and be like, that's not going to happen. It's only in the way that you want. It's only for the betterment of you. And like, he's very clear that I'm not forcing you to do anything, that you can roam around in the way that you want, like all of these things. And that is intentional, but I don't think it's intentional in a manipulative way. When I read it, and of course I am a Rhys fan, but when I read it, I take it as he really is sympathetic. Because he can see it. He can feel everything that she's feeling down that bond majority of the time, because she has been working on putting her walls up, right? But he's felt so many things that he knows that she's struggling. And then he sees her physically and how much she's deteriorating and how well she is not doing when she's at the spring court, that I really think it is truly just out of empathy that he's there to try to help her and to heal her. He goes so far as to say that, right? Like, he's very clear with her. He's like, I will say it only once. Like, you're not a prisoner here. You can walk around and do what it is that you need to do. And you can also stay here for as long as you want. But I need help. And if you're going to be here, I would love it if you could help me. But also, if you can't stomach it, it's fine. I'll figure it out. I would like you to help me, but it's okay if you can't. But you can still stay here if you need refuge. Like, he's trying to come at all different angles to make it very clear to her that he just wants her to be okay. And at the same time, he also has said, like, if you just want to sit there and be something to be locked away and to just be put up on a shelf and not really helped or healed, then sure, go back to the spring court. But you bow to no one. You should never have to. And if that's the way that you're being made to feel, and you're being left out of the loop, and you're being disrespected, and you're being treated poorly, then again, if you allow that, that's on you, but you deserve better. He has always been very clear and adamant with her that, like, he doesn't deal or take kindly to the shit that Tamlin is doing. And so that is why he had more go and get her. And even though it was all above board, he did it because he felt her absolutely panicking down that bond, and more than she ever did on the wedding. And he's so bristled by it. Like, when she shows up, and the first thing that Feyre stutters in, like, all of her shock is like, he locked me in. Like, he can see in every single sense of the statement that she is dying and struggling and not okay. He can see it so clearly. He just can't fathom the fact that someone would do that to her and that she can't stand up for herself. Now, to some degree, I think he can understand why she can't stand up for herself, but he's not going to allow it. And so he's going to do everything that he can to empower her and reinforce her own belief and value in herself. And that is where we leave off at the end of chapter 15, is he's really trying to open this up to her to be like, you can just be here, and you can breathe, and you can be free, and like, you can just be here. I will never make you do anything. And it's a side of Rhysand that is wholly stark and contrast to the evil that we have, been told that he is. Feyre continues to struggle with the fact that Tamlin always thought of him as an enemy, and then goes and sees all these things that he's doing for his people and for her, and can't understand it, right? Like, she can see all sides of it to some degree, but just alone, if anything, when it comes down to the way in which that she's being treated, obviously, Rhysand is in the winning column of that because of everything I just mentioned. There's no way that Tamlin would ever be able to compete. And so where we leave off with her in an emotional sense and in a mental state is that she's saying, like, maybe I was so broken and shattered that of course I was going to fall in love for the first person or being that showed me any kind of kindness and love, but that I was willing to sacrifice and lose myself in it because I just didn't know any better. Like, there was no way that I was ever going to avoid that. She's questioning everything. And she even says, like, I don't know that the Spring Court is my home anymore. And maybe I'll go back one day, and I want Tamlin to understand. But at the same time, like, I don't know that I will ever go back. But then also she's saying, well, maybe if he has time to heal and I have time to heal, it'll be fine. But I think her mental breakdown at the end, where she was engulfed in darkness and flame, where the ring melted off her finger, was symbolic enough, where it's like she is literally burning from the inside out, so much so from this depression and despair that the ring doesn't even exist anymore in terms of that symbolic nature of them being together. And in her mind, to some degree, she's like, he is not the person for me if he's going to treat me this way. And that is exactly the kind of Feyre that we want. Even though she's still down in the dumps and struggling at this point, that is the Feyre that I want to see, because she does deserve better. And this is why I get so amped up for Rhysand and his court and his people and his inner circle, is because they give her the space to find herself and they help her through it and they help her heal. And I'm really excited to reread that again. And it makes me smile and it makes me very happy because she deserves to just be a badass. And that's the best part of some of the SJM books, is when the female main characters step into themselves and really show us who the fuck they are. And I think that she needs that, because there was moments in book 1 where we saw that and saw what she was capable of. But then in this book, even Tamlin says things like, you'll never make it. You wouldn't survive against the High Fae and all these enemies and whatever. And she's like, well, at least give me a fighting chance. But he's like, no. And he doesn't realize how cruel and detrimental and how much he's like stripping her down and not lifting her up. And I just want to see her get lifted up. And that's what makes it so exciting about what Rhys is offering, even if we're still a little trepidatious. I mean, obviously I'm not, but first time readers, I would understand. But at least he's giving her a chance to breathe and to be free and to find herself, because nobody was helping her do that in the Spring Court. Now, the very, very last thing I want to comment on is, I think where things really took a turn is when she told Tamlin that she was drowning and basically was being suffocated, and he lost his shit in that study. And we see that at first she thinks he protected her with power, but she ended up realizing that she protected herself. And she even says for a moment there, she like leaves it up. Like Tamlin can't get through her wall. Like he tries, but he can't at first. And then eventually like he does, because I think she's kind of coming down from the shock. And so the power is softening, and then he comes through. But even that moment they never talk about. But Rhysand asks her about it. He says, I felt pure terror down the bond. What happened? And she mentions a little bit of a scuffle, but like it was nothing. It was an argument. But he's like, well, that's not an argument, because you were literally terrified. And she's like, it's nothing. It's fine. But that was the moment where I think Feyre realized that if she speaks her mind truly to him in the way that she wants to and tries to advocate for herself or for any way in which she's feeling, he's going to lose his shit. And even though he comes groveling back and asks for forgiveness and all this kind of stuff, that right there is like classic emotional abuse and potentially physical if any of that stuff had hit or harmed her. And so, of course, it's so understandable that Feyre is hesitant or worried or whatever, but you just see her fall back into him and you realize how so weak she is from everything. She's so beaten down and battered that she can't stand up for herself. And that's in part why Rhysand's message hits home, because he's like, you have to advocate for yourself. Like, you have to stand up for yourself. There's no way that you deserve anything less than everything that you want. And so if you won't do it for yourself, nobody will, because he sure as shit won't. We're at a point where as much as so much has happened and there is worry for her and for what's going to come ahead to some degree, I truly believe that readers at this point are in a place where they're hopeful of what's to come for her. And what Rhysand is offering provides a little bit of that excitement and hope. So it is exciting as a reader to be in this place and to get through it. And I do really remember that this second book, this Teal book, as being one of my favorites. I think that it's when things really start to kind of come to life, and because Feyre finds her footing again as a person and she kind of steps into herself. We'll see where I'm at in the end, because I know obviously so much happens in Pink and then Orange is its own thing, but I really think that this book is my favorite of the series. But I'm enjoying it so far, and still, of course, just loving everything about this writing and these characters in this reread. And I hope that you all are too. So that's where I'm going to leave it for now. As always, thank you for joining me and for doing the read along and for listening to the episode. Please be sure you're subscribed to the YouTube and that you like the episode. Please engage with and like my posts on Instagram, Threads, and TikTok, and make sure that you're connected with us there. And friendly reminder, we are now on Spotify, so you can follow along the page there. I'm still in the process of getting all of the existing episodes uploaded, and I hope to share there every time I put an episode out on YouTube, but we're just getting that up and going, so appreciate the follows there as well. But thank you so much, friends, and until next time.